Welcome to the African Hub for Sustainable Creative Economies Knowledge Hub interviews. My name is Avril Joffe. I'm in the Department of Cultural Policy and Management at Wits University. I'm the lead investigator for the South African Hub, focusing on film and digital media. I'm here sitting with Maganthrie Pillay, who is going to be speaking to us about her journey in the film industry in South Africa. So very welcome to you, Maganthrie. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit how you got into the industry and your journey so far?
I've been immersed in story world from the time I was very young. My mother told the most beautiful stories, mythological stories. A lot of it was around gods and goddesses. I loved dancing. I loved singing. And I always say I was probably dancing barely before I could walk. From my earliest years, I went to the cinema with my dad. He loved the cinema as well. And all the films I watched were actually in Tamil or Hindi. And they were in the neighborhood that I lived in. I walked to the cinema in Chatsworth, in Unit 3, to Adams Cinema or Twin City or Majestic Cinema. Majestic was the only one that showed English films. So the very first English film that I saw in a cinema was at the Alhambra in Durban. The Gods Must Be Crazy was that film, which at the time I really enjoyed and may have actually brought me to my interest in history and the Khoisan and the history of the Cape, who knows. But I do remember that it was segregated. And I do remember that we couldn't sit wherever we wanted. As people of color, as people classified as Indian, we were separated from other audience members who were classified white. So that was one of my very earliest remembrances. As I said, I loved story. But apart from that, I was actually in a world of creativity. My cousins and I would literally be designing outfits and making them or having them made. So we were part of the whole production process as well of making clothes. And it's only now that I realize just the idea that you can have a sketch, talk to someone who'll then physically make it and then be physically wearing an outfit in and of itself is pretty revolutionary. And I got to do that from being very young. And so the idea of taking a script from the page to the screen was actually something that was built into me, the possibility that I could create something that would end up as a real thing that, you know, could be used. So I've been very lucky in that sense of being immersed in that world of creativity and textures and patterns and colors and shapes. So I'm talking, you know, building worlds all the time, building characters all the time within that specific context. I'm going to jump forward to loving the theater, always being involved in high school and primary school and high school. I was in every play and finding every opportunity to make plays. And I actually co-directed a play with a friend and a classmate, Rose Govender. And I did this lovely little story about girls in high school. It was quite famous. I just can't remember the name of it. But it was such a hit. And it also then made me think, I could maybe direct. And I actually managed to get into university to study teaching in literature, drama, as well as education. So technically, I was training to teach these subjects in high school. We were so blessed to have been there at a time when we got the opportunity to be in a play called Side by Side Masizizane. And the first director was Merle Kaminsky. We worked with Durban Pillay, and the choreographer was Merle Kaminsky, but the arranger, the composer was Sivadeva. who ended up doing the Isidingo music. He was one of the first people that did the music for Isidingo, and the opening title Sting, they still continued to play long afterwards. That was a musical. It really gave me the bug. I'm a FiIm girl, as in I watched FiIm, put all the furniture aside and would sing and dance along on every episode. But the idea that I could be in a FiIm-like situation, I mean, I was aiming for that, but I never thought it would happen. And that project, we got to play, we had standing ovations. We got to take it out to a few places, and it made such an impact. I still meet people who, say that particular production made such an impact. So I was bitten. I did lots of theater thereafter in the years that came through, but I didn't quite, I wanted to direct, but I didn't know how. And that becomes the turning point for me, because I actually end up doing a project that doesn't work. And that sets me off on my journey to be like, I'm going to learn how to direct. First theater and then film. And that failure is actually what ignited my passion and made me decide that come hell or high water, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to crack the code of directing. And that's actually what led me on the journey of looking for information. And there weren't film schools then. I was lucky to have done my honors. I did my honors in drama with a focus on directing. And so I actually learned how to direct theater, and that was an amazing experience. We workshopped the play, and it was around Black gay women and how they negotiated being Black, being women, being in communities that did not necessarily accept us. So that was like an important piece. Skipping ahead, I managed to get onto the first gay and lesbian film festival called Out in Africa as the Joburg coordinator. And I got to meet directors. I got to be in the room with directors. I got to be in workshops. And that was very affirming. I then worked on the South African International Film Festival once again, working with directors, inviting them as guests and literally having to be with them during the course of the festival, being present during their master classes as well as their workshops. And they all were like, oh, of course you're a director. And I'm like, oh, okay, I want to be, but am I? How do I do this? It still took a few years to kind of learn how to do that. Then met my producer, and who is also my husband. And I was like, I want to make movies. And he's like, the only way you can do it, I was working at the SABC at the time, is to actually start making it. And I then joined him on the journey of actually saying, these are my ideas, and sending it out for commissions, and getting some of those commissions, and actually beginning in documentary to figure out, how does this whole directing thing work? How do I translate my ideas onto the screen? Many years later.
Can I then ask, as a film director, what would you say is the project that most makes you feel, aha, I made it, I got there?
I can't say that I've made it or that I've got there yet. I can say I have a body of work that I'm very proud of, because whenever I do anything, I keep working until there's nothing more to be done. I have to say 34 South was the first film directed by a woman of color. And I was honored. At the time, my only interest was to tell the story, and we only then realized that actually being the first woman of color to direct a fiction was actually, on the one hand, it was exciting, but it was also pretty sad, because it showed us how much work they still needed to happen, and how many more people still needed to be empowered to have the courage or the access, whatever was required to become a director. So I would have to say 34 South was an incredible journey on every level. It took us 8 years, but it took us 4 years in terms of all the prep and the fundraising. And the next 4 was really about getting the shooting done, getting the post-production done. From the US, worked with us as a sound designer, Albert Lord, who worked on Preacher's Wife and NYPD Blues. So that kind of really revolutionized how we thought about sound in relation to film. The next feature that I actually directed was in the US. It's called Dreamtime. Again, a very special story that I feel I was inspired to do around dreams and possibilities and solutions for the future. That is still in post-production. I think my approach with every single thing I do is I put everything into it, because at the end of the day, the audience doesn't care about your problems. You know, they are there to be communicated with. I've had the opportunity to make over 30 documentaries, both commissioned, independent, as well as for various organizations. And, you know, it takes a lot to tell any story. And so while, you know, that is generally my approach, I have to say I learned so much on 34 South.
So what would you say then as a woman director, and you mentioned you were the first director of color, which is amazing that we even have to not acknowledge that. What would you say are the key challenges facing women in film in South Africa today? Probably
Ourselves is a major issue. To believe that we can direct, that's the biggest obstacle. Once you're over that obstacle, then there's still issues of access. You can go to film school, but at film school, there's such competition for who's going to direct, you know, and usually the person who's most confident gets to direct. So sometimes you can have people go to film school, but they only end up directing much later, because they just, even, you know, a lot of people end up producing and not directing because it's like, oh, can I even do it? So that's a big challenge. I think we're in a moment now. We have people like Nosipho Demisa. I know she has a new surname. The director of Seva and Noma Seva and Data, which made a huge impact globally, but also with her work on Blood and Water, has proven that, you know, women of color can make fantastic content. And that's really exciting. It's been doing really well. So access is an issue. It's always going to be an issue, but one has to keep working. It's really important to get to film festivals. It's really important to get to film markets, where you can network with people, understand the ecosystem, understand how to find a producer to work with, because I think that's a key as well, because directors are not necessarily producers. And so finding a producer you can work with who believes in you and he's willing to take that journey with you, I think is great. In the meantime, if you can make shorter films, go ahead and do it. Because the truth is, all the practice we can get in is actually what we need. I meet young people all the time who are like, yeah, I want to make a feature. And I'm like, have you made a short yet? And they're like, no. I'm like, start there. Build the muscles for it. And as you win at that, you can build your confidence, you can build your style, learn how to communicate with people, understand more about the preparation process, and get closer to your vision and what you see on screen. So making shorter films is a great way. And there is actually a demand for short films as well. So we can actually go straight to our audiences these days, you know. So we're in such an exciting time. As women filmmakers, as filmmakers in general.
So what does a future for you look like? What does Maganthrie Pillay want to still achieve? What are some of your goals for the future?
Well, I'm going to be co-curating on a theatre festival coming up in November. I did experiment a little bit in front of the camera. I went back to, being in front of the camera. I did a piece called Lockdown Blues with some of my former students. It was really exciting. And I definitely am going to be doing more stuff in front of the screen and expand into other mediums. 360, virtual reality, animation. I'd love to do some of that stuff. I do have a couple of projects I'm dying to direct, but I'm working on it. I'm developing it in the meantime. And definitely I'd like to do some co-producing, both locally and internationally.
Well, thank you so much, Maganthrie, for sharing your incredible journey with us here at the African Hub for Sustainable Creative Economies. And I wish you a lot of luck and success in your future career.
Thank you so much. Being a filmmaker is by no means a sprint, it's a marathon.
Wonderful point to end on. Thank you so much, Maganthrie.